nerds? My name is Leslie Smith. Welcome back to the Nerdy Narrative. Today I will be going over all of the things that I read during the month of November, what I thought about each one, and just a couple of brief thoughts about each one just to kind of refresh your memory, because if you watch the channel then you've seen a ton of these have reviews already, so I won't spend too much time on it. This is just a way to just refresh all of us about what I read and remind you of the things that you thought, oh man, that sounds good. I need to write that down and add it to my want to read on Goodreads, or maybe even add it to your Christmas wish list. Before we get started, I want to remind you guys, author James Flynn has a new collection of short stories that will be coming out June 1st, 2023. It is available for pre-order, and I also wanted to tell y'all, the author told me he is going to be hosting a giveaway for this collection. Another way you can find out about it, other than just listening to me, is by signing up on his website. I will have the link down in the description box below. You can find all sorts of goodies on there. There are some free stories out there that you can read. There are sample stories that you can read of his other works to see if this is an author's writing style that you jive with, and hopefully get you excited about this collection's release. I will be reading this prior to June and reviewing it, so be watching for that coming up probably around the May time frame. Now let's talk about what I read during the month of November, and we're going to start with this chunker. Now, I did not read this whole collection in November. I've been working on it slowly over a few months as part of a read-along hosted by my friend Jake over at the Bookish Drummer. The first batch of stories, in my opinion, Stephen King just knocked out of the ballpark. Home runs, and yes, for those of you that have read this collection, that might be a bit of a pun on the last couple of stories in here. After that first batch, it started to lose its luster for me. I had begun to think this was going to be my favorite collection of Stephen King short stories. No. They just started going downhill for me and continued to go downhill. So this one did not dethrone Skeleton Crew as my favorite short story collection. There are a couple of more collections, I believe, left that we'll be reading. I'm guessing, I haven't seen the new schedule on Jake's channel yet, but I will have his channel link below if you want to check it out and join us. For my Joan Didion nonfiction essay that I read as part of another read-along that's hosted by the Literary Apothecary, I read Notes from a Native Daughter, Letter from a Native Daughter, something from a Native Daughter, Notes from a Native Daughter. And I was very curious as to what that was going to mean exactly, and it turns out she is writing about California, as she often does. That's where she's from, and Joan is just really hard to match her as an author when she writes about a place, a city, a building. The way she does it is just absolutely brilliant. So that is another essay hit for me. The next book that I read in November was Sundial by Catriona Ward. I checked this book out from my library. I got the physical copy. I also checked out the audiobook. The audiobook was a complete miss for me. I thought that I didn't like this book, and turns out I just was not connecting with the audiobook narrator. It got to the point where I could not stand it. I turned the audiobook off, and I thought, you know what, let me pick up the physical copy, spend some time with it, and see if it's just the book or if it's just the narrator. It was the narrator, because once I just started reading physically, I fell in love with Catriona Ward's writing style. This story was so good. I know a lot of people call it horror, but it's a thriller. It really is. It's a mystery whodunit. There's kind of lots of whodunits involved in here, and there are parts of it that made me uncomfortable because they're experimenting on dogs. Go ahead and kind of put that little content warning out there. Those of you that are animal lovers, you may have a little bit of difficulty with that section. Just the mystery of, why were they experimenting on dogs? What is the story behind this main character, this woman named Rob? What's going on with her marriage, her children? There's an altercation between her two young daughters. As a mother, Rob, first thing she does is she goes and checks the older daughter's room to see what's going on. She finds some tiny animal bones. If you're like me, the first thing your mind's gonna go to is well, that's how serial killers get their start. So you can see why I was enraptured with the story, because you know I love anything to do with serial killers. I loved this book. It was such a great time. If you haven't read it yet, highly encourage it. Get it from your library. Make sure you're okay with the dog warning. And for those of you that have read it, this was the Wine and Crime Book Club pick for the month of November. There was a live show where we talked about it, which I'll have linked up above and down below in the description box if you want to check that out. Next up, I read Seekers, The Winds of Change by Troy Knowlton. Troy sent this book to me to read in consideration for review, and this was one of those stories that I had a knee-jerk reaction, okay, this is what I think about it. But then I kept talking about it with friends. Yeah, I talked with Troy, the author, at length. And then I realized a couple of weeks later, I'm still talking about this book. I'm really excited about reading book 2. You know, I'm always checking for updates from Troy about when the next book's going to be out. And I thought, wait a minute. I like this book more than I thought I did. The two elements that really sucked me in for this one are the characters and the monsters. I know that's probably weird that your two favorite things about this are that. So I really enjoyed Seekers, The Winds of Change. Now this one, oh my goodness. The Hollows by Daniel Church. This is an arc that I received from Angry Robot Books. It just felt very reminiscent to me of Salem's Lot, which I absolutely love that book. In The Hollows, it takes place in the Peak District. There's this big snowstorm that comes. There is something that has been awakened that is terrorizing these people, and it is so good. I did do a review for this one, so I won't spend a whole lot of time talking about it. I'll have it linked in all the places for you to check out, but it definitely made sure I will not forget the name Daniel Church. I'm very excited for anything he comes out with. It will immediately go to the top of my TBR must-read list. Next, this was my patron pick of the month for November. This was picked for me by Anne, and it was another hit. When you pick up a book, a retelling, a mythological retelling, in this case of the Chinese moon goddess Shangyi, you think it's going to have a bit of a lyrical fairy tale type of style, and she perfected that. It's not overdone. I wouldn't call it purple prose, but it just flows. It's beautiful. This takes place in the celestial kingdom, and it feels that way. The descriptions and the way that it's written, the conversations, the things that happen between the characters, it just fits. It was just, this is how I like my retelling. So if you have any recommendations of retellings that fit this style, please put those in the comments down below. The ones that I've read, I just haven't been impressed with. So more like this, please. And I think this was right about the time that I picked up The Stars Within by Lena Allison Knight. This is one of the top 6 books chosen from our slush pile by Team Book Invasion for the self-published science fiction competition, or SPSFC. The team decided that we were going to not post our reviews or star ratings, just keep that under wraps to not accidentally influence each other. But I did enjoy this one, and as soon as I can post that review, I will have that available for you. Another top 6 book that I read this month was Melody by David Hoffer. It's a first contact story, so if you're into that, I would definitely say check that one out. Another book that I read this month and absolutely loved was The Forever Witness by Edward Humes. I found this one scrolling through NetGalley one day and thought it sounded good because you know me, I love anything true crime related, serial killer. I've watched all the documentaries that are available. I'm just obsessed with this sort of thing. I thought this was a fictional book. It's a true story. I started this book one night. I read probably 30%. I came up for air and I thought, the way this is laid out, it sounds like it might be a true story. So I Googled it, it was, but I wouldn't read any of the information because I didn't know about this story because it happened to a couple in Canada. I didn't want to know, I wanted to find out through the investigation as the author was presenting it in the book. You get the horrible story of, this was a couple that was found brutally murdered back in, I want to say 1986, never solved. It's a cold case. And this is how genetic genealogy was able to solve this case. I do believe by the time this video goes up that book will be available for purchase or if you want to request it from your library. Next, I read and reviewed Gerzel by I Anonymous. This is the first in a historical fiction series, and this one is about a dragon. If you've grown up watching any type of Arthurian movie, cartoon, read those books, it's going to feel very familiar. You're going to recognize almost all the names, the events that's happening, so it feels very familiar. Now, this is one that the story is told to you, you're not shown. I like to walk through the events as they happen with characters, so this one was not as much as a hit for me as it might be for some of you who love hearing history, especially when it's given to you by an author who takes a completely refreshing take on these events and presents them from that perspective. Let's see. I did continue my buddy read with Kate from the Literary Apothecary. I almost knocked myself out with this book just then. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Kate and I have been buddy reading the illustrated versions of the Harry Potter series, and I especially love the illustrated edition, I'm very sad that there's only 5 out so far. The last 2 haven't been illustrated yet. You know, if you get the itch to reread this series, I highly recommend doing the illustrated version. It just adds something special. I don't know how to explain it other than that. I read The Awakening Fire by Cassidy Faline. This is one I accepted for review from the author, and I am so glad that I did. This was a hit for me. I think I read it in 2 days. Y'all, this book came in the mail and I opened it. I did a little short for it. I read the back and I thought, you know what? I'm gonna sit down and read some of this. And I was hooked. Just like that, I was hooked. I read so late that night. I just did not want to put it down. But what struck me and made me want to read this book is the tagline that was on the front that said, 3 men, 1 throne. Who will win? And then I saw the cover and I thought, I really want to read this. And I looked at the blurb and it talked about some ancients who had been, they weren't anymore currently. Some people were trying to bring it back. And when I started reading it, it felt whimsical. I thought, okay, I like this guy, Hyro. What's he up to? He's a commoner who still worships the ancients in secret because it's been outlawed by the current king. And he is wanting to get the common people together to rise up against this king. The king is not ruling according to what the ancients teach. Let's rise up. Let's dethrone this turkey. Let's get somebody on the throne who's going to go back to the old way. And that's where things get a little dark. But I love dark. I did not expect that was going to go here. And it's one of those that all 3 of these men that are trying to take this throne, they're all morally gray, but they're charismatic. Whoever's perspective I was reading in, I would be like, okay, you did something that made me uncomfortable that I don't think you should rule, but then they would win me over. And I was just bouncing around like, who do I want on this throne? If book 2 had already been available, I would have immediately started it. Like, I emailed the author and I'm like, hey, I offer myself as tribute to read the arc for book 2. How's that going, by the way? I know that is the worst thing to do to an author, but oh my gosh, you make me addicted to your stories. I want more. And that happened with this next book I'm going to talk about, Blissful Ascending by J.C.M. Byrne. I read and reviewed this one as part of the Escapist book tour. I'll have all that information linked. But thank goodness that there are 3 books out in this one, so I can continue to feed this addiction for a couple of more books at least. I absolutely loved this story. Rowan is a superhero in space. Well, okay, so he's a hybrid. He's half human and half Ildrak. Ildrak is the current empire that has conquered the area of the galaxy that this takes place in. And Rowan previously worked for the Empire. He's now retired and he works as a tow chief for a space station called Wistful, a sentient space station. Have I hooked you yet? No? Well, my goodness. How about bugs on a nearby behemoth planet? Or maybe some alien refugees that come through a nearby wormhole that look like theirs? How about now? You need to hear more about this amazing, super fun story. Then please check out my review for Blissful Ascending by J.C.M. Byrne. It's so good. Ooh, when I picked that one up, I revealed this beauty as my next read that I finished in November. Irish mythology, folklore, wrapped around factual events that occurred in this country. This was amazing. I have filmed the review. I don't know if that one will go up before this one. If it hasn't, keep your eyes peeled. It'll probably be the next video that comes out on the channel. This was an amazing historical fiction fantasy debut by Shauna Lawless. Another one that I cannot wait for the second one. If you're a fan of The Last Kingdom and you're sad that that show is over, this is going to fill that ache. This is going to fill that gap. It's going to feed that desire for more battles between the Vikings and the Irish. It's so good. The scheming. Oh my gosh. We've got 2 immortal races that are in the mix. One is a warrior race. One is a race that has fire magic, but they're hiding from one another. Why? Why are they hiding from one another? Audiobook lovers, this audiobook is absolutely amazing. Aoife McMahon just, perfect for this story, and I hope she does the next one too. And then my final book that I snuck in on the last day of the month is Helicopter Parenting in the Age of Drones by Patrick Barb. This is the first thing I've ever read by Patrick. It will not be the last. This story held me in its grip from the first page to the last page. And when I finished it, I was like, did that happen? I reread the last chapter and I was like, let me go back a few more chapters, and I reread it again. This author has a pair on them, and I love the brave, bold choice that they made with this story. Imagine a not so distant future where technology has advanced a little bit further, where you can have your newborn infant fitted with a pair of contacts that will upload images to a file in the cloud that allow you to see the things that they see. Like this father who wanted to see what his son saw the first time that he looked at him. There's also a hidden back door where you can get into a live feed seeing exactly what your child sees. As a parent, what do you think you would do with that? And what does that mean for the privacy of this child? Just parents, what would you do with this information? This was amazing. This was absolutely amazing. I do have a written review. I'll put the link down to my website below if you want to check that out. But those are all of the things that I read during the month of November. It is a lot. I'm always impressed with how much I end up reading in a month. It's like I forget how much I read every day, but I absolutely love it. This is my passion. This is my joy. This is what makes me happy. Reading and talking about what I read and sharing with all of you in hopes that I'm able to help you find your next read, something that you're going to love just like I do. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm so happy you were here with me today. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one.